Okay, we're going to move on to our next presenter, and we're looking forward to hearing from Kemp Anderson. And I'll give you a little bit of background on Kemp. He is the president of Kemp Anderson Consulting. His business provides navigation to business owners and executive leadership on a variety of issues, including mergers and acquisitions. And previously, Kemp was the VP of Business Development at Scott's Lawn Service, where he led all M&A activity there. And prior to Scott's, he was director of acquisitions for Rollins, a parent company of Orkin, and he was responsible for expanding the company via M&A activity throughout North America and in the Caribbean. So a little further back, we'll go to start his career in the pest control industry. His service experience started with Sears Termite and Pest Control and branch operations, and then customer service leadership, district operations management, and so forth. And Kemp also holds a bachelor's degree in political science from Rollins College, as well as an MBA from the Roy E. Crummer Graduate School of Business at Rollins College. So Kemp's going to be speaking today on the topic of leading in a post-COVID-19 business environment. Kemp?
Thank you, Brad. I want to thank certainly PCT, GIE, the sponsors, and the listeners as well today for everybody taking the time with the M&A conference. This is always, I think, a nice value add, certainly for the industry. As I get started today, one of the things I would ask the listeners is, as we talk about, we will certainly touch on COVID and even economics to a degree. I would ask everybody to please put politics aside. I'm certainly not going to be going into any sort of political conversations. With that said, as we look at the pest control industry, certainly as we look at COVID, even if we go back to different significant events, whether it's 9/11, the housing bubble, the internet bubble, certainly COVID, I think the pest control industry proves itself to be very, very strong. I suspect most of us, as we were growing up, maybe going to college or working our ways through our careers, many of us maybe didn't plan on being in pest control, but I suspect as we sit here today, most of us are probably thrilled that we are in pest control. It is an incredible industry. I know I'm certainly grateful to be in it. I did start in the industry in 98. I actually started in a branch. I've actually owned my own pest control company, and real quickly, certainly been fortunate to work for some of the amazing public brands in our industry, Orkin being one of them. Worked for private companies, even private equity firms. And at this point in the career in Kemp Anderson Consulting in general, we've certainly worked for both buyers and sellers. I think these viewpoints give us a pretty unique view of our industry. What I'm going to try to cover today real quickly, I'll try to stay on time. We're going to talk a little bit about COVID being an essential business. A lot of people are saying or thinking, COVID is behind us. Try to address that a little bit. PPP, PPE, and safety related issues. I think all the speakers today have touched briefly on economics, taxes, interest rates, and inflation. And then just a couple thoughts on, if this is the new normal, trying to survive and even thrive in today's business environment, and even try to address whether or not people should consider selling or holding. There's a fair amount to unpack, I think, in today's environment. Regarding being an essential business, it's always interesting to me to look at the Harvard Business Review in the 1970s when we had significant inflation, we had gas lines, we had a lot of things going on in the economy. And Harvard actually tried to, I would use the word bucket, or understand how consumers prioritize consumption. They basically came up with 4 buckets, I would call them. If we start with number 4, it's expendable, right? Is the purchase, if I'm the consumer, I'm asking myself, is this purchase I'm about to make perceived as unnecessary or unjustifiable? The third would be postponable. The consumer is saying, can I put this off? The second would be a treat. The consumer is saying, can I justify this? Should I do this? This may be a little decadent, but perhaps I'm going to spend some money right now to do this. And the number one that they came up with, where consumers in challenging economic times really will spend the money, is when the consumer says, is this necessary? Is this spend perceived as central to my well-being? And I believe when we look at the pest control industry, that's us. That is the industry. We are central to well-being. We, in a lot of spaces, certainly a lot of entomology schools around the country, I think, would advocate that we're a health-related service. And at the end of the day, if as business owners, we are out there saying, in teaching our employees and maybe even educating our customers that we're health related, and helping the consumers understand the value of what we do, then this is very important to understand and maybe put into practice in marketing and even at the branch level. From a clinical perspective or governmental perspective, an essential service is, quote unquote, not allowed to legally strike. Certainly recognizing there's not a lot of union shops in the pest control industry. If you set that aside, we have been designated an essential service, an essential industry. I think MPMA has done a nice job lobbying for that, as well as other enterprises in the industry. And I think we would all agree that pest control is critical to society, much like hospitals, healthcare, utilities, certainly electric, water, law enforcement, and so on. So I think we're all pretty darn fortunate to be in the industry, and we should consider making sure that the customers and the employees understand certainly the benefits of that essential designation. Regarding COVID, I'm going to talk about this in a couple of slides, continues to be with us. I think we should all stay guarded from a company perspective. Look, COVID continues to mutate. There are new variants. This chart shows where the Delta wave is and where it is modeled or projected to go. With the Delta variant, there's the Lambda variant. There's a new variant in Colombia that is proving to be very difficult. It does not even have a name yet. Its number is B1621. And it is potentially also through international travel. It is not here yet, but certainly the experts are watching it and concerned. So, I think we all need to stay certainly aware of that. As the mutations continue to develop, this chart is, I think, very interesting. This is called the Delta drop, which is the change in the number of visits for from 2021 dating back to 2019 for 4 sectors, right? Gyms, restaurants, grocery stores, and retail. And you can see the change in the number of visits to these sectors. This graph to me was really, really interesting and telling. This graph just came out in the last couple of weeks, and it was piggybacked with the announcement. And this is something for us to think about in our corporate offices, our branch offices, as we go to customers' homes. It was piggybacked by the CDC's update that even vaccinated Americans should wear masks indoors. I know that it seems like the governmental guidance has moved all over the place in the last 18 months or so. Regardless, I think it is pretty interesting that we can see these shifts in consumer behaviors and continued shifts in CDC guidance. It is, and I definitely wanted to point out that, whether it's a branch, a corporate office, or customer homes, or certainly customers' businesses, that is something we should keep tabs on, which is the mask guidance. Piggybacking this graph also is interesting numbers that remote workplace seems to be increasing again. Said differently, employee visits to workplaces is declining again. And, just things that we should all, as business leaders, be aware of. Also, consideration, I have yet to hear of a pest control company that is mandating vaccinations for employees, but this slide names just a few corporations that are, and I suspect all of us can recognize names on this list, be it Walmart, Disney, Google, Facebook, Lyft, Uber, Twitter, Tyson Foods, Walgreens, Kellogg's, and so on. These companies and many, many more are mandating vaccinations for employees. The employees effectively have to make a choice regarding vaccination or employment. This could be a sign potentially of things to come. And it made me wonder, from a leadership position, this is a very, very, very complicated subject. If anybody were contemplating going in this direction, I would certainly advocate having your company and attorneys involved, HR consultants, to help guide you through this type of decision. But there may be benefits too, right? Company benefits with safety, branding, marketing, and even customer and employee retention with a vaccinated workplace. As I looked into these names are global behemoths, and at the end of the day, I just thought it was something interesting to think about and point out. This slide to me is always powerful. Stephen Jobs, we all certainly know, we lost him too early, but one of his quotes, and he had many that were quite powerful, was get closer than ever to your customer, so close that you tell them what they need well before they realize it themselves. As I thought about this, do the customers actually know why they need our services, whether it's residential or commercial? Again, do they understand that pest control is health related? Do we understand what our customers need and want in this new environment? And to take that even a step further, can every employee in the company tell every customer why they need pest control, why pest control is essential, why we keep homes and businesses healthy? And candidly, can the employees tell your customers why they need your company and our service and our industry? And if we think about the environment today, if we think about COVID and its impacts, not only on businesses, but on families, this may be a thought that sort of resonates with leadership going forward. So what I'm going to try to cover next, and I'm going to cover it, I think at a high level and fairly quickly, is PPP and some of the details around that. At the end of the day, all small businesses were eligible. The maturity rate is 2 years at 1%. Loans after June 5th, 2020 could go as far as 5 years. A lot of folks, I don't think, realize that there was actually 3 rounds. I will show you a chart in a minute that I thought was pretty interesting. And at the end of the day, PPP loans were forgiven up to 100% of the funds as long as you effectively, I'm going to say, followed the rules of that process. When you look at the distribution, it was really, really interesting. Again, regarding 3 rounds, the round 1 was $349 billion in funding, and it was gone in 14 days. That's, at least in my mind, fairly shocking. The second round totaled $320 billion and was gone in very short order. At the end, the funds were depleted as of May 31st this year. And I'm sure most of us on this call certainly know PPP is no longer available. I would say to folks out there that have PPP to certainly work with your CPA, certainly work with your corporate attorney or your lender, and be very diligent about forgiveness. Understand that whether you're holding your company or selling your company, this subject, I believe, needs to be dealt with professionally and appropriately, properly. It needs to be recorded properly. And if you are selling your company, at the end of the day, you will find PPP discussions in certainly due diligence and in the contracts, and even as schedules to the contracts. Buyers want to make sure that the loans have in fact been forgiven and that that is well documented. When you look at the 3 rounds and you look at this slide, you can see the blue line at the bottom of each chart is round 1, the red line is round 2, the gray line is round 3. And you can see cumulative number or units of loans in each round, and billions of dollars of loan disbursements in each round. This certainly impacted our customers and our industry. It is, to me, this is very telling. This impacted a lot of companies in our space and out, but you can see round 1 of the cumulative loans within a matter of 2 weeks go from basically 0 to 4 million, sort of flatlined, just sub 6 million, and then up to 12 million at the end of round 3. When you look at the accumulation of the value of loans dispersed, you can see round 1 at that figure that was 350 million, another 320 million in round 2 that came very, very quickly, and then billion, and then up to 800 billion at the end of round 3. Staggering numbers, and I think staggering timeline. This chart to me is pretty interesting. You look at companies and the PPP going out and the PPP on the blue line, the balance being used over time. And you also see the green and orange line with revenues and expenses that in all sectors have been, I'm going to call pretty flat. There's some interesting questions that came to my mind. What happens when that PPP money is all used? How did you manage your PPP? Was it forgiven? Was it documented right? Was it on the balance sheet and recorded properly? And are we contemplating, as the balance draws down across the economy, what influence might that have on our industry, residentially and commercially? This to me was an interesting chart. Regarding forgiveness terms, on the first draw, the two keys, it was obviously a form. I'm sure most people on this call have been through it. Employee and compensation levels needed to be maintained, and 60% of the proceeds needed to be spent on payroll costs. That was first draw, second draw. Interestingly as well, if borrowers did not or do not apply for forgiveness within 10 months after the last day of the covered period, then the PPP loan itself, the payments are no longer deferred. So being on top of the forgiveness process is as, or possibly even more important than I would say being on the front end of the application process. So to take a shift in this conversation regarding PCO's operating tips in the new normal, if you will. And again, certainly I suspect everybody on this call is familiar with the vast majority of these suggestions is certainly wear face coverings. If respirators are required, wear N95 or better. Certainly cleanliness, washing hands, sanitizing hands with sanitizer, 60 to 70% plus alcohol, keeping, I think, uniforms clean and general appearance clean. And then certainly just basic, I would say, hygiene, not only in a corporate office setting, in a branch setting. Certainly these things, I think, are significant considerations when engaged with residential or commercial customers. It's sort of an interesting little term here, respiratory etiquette. This may seem silly, but certainly making sure that there's training on respiratory etiquette when employees are involved with each other or with any customer. We have all had social distancing, I think, beaten into us at this point, with coworkers in public, and certainly with any sort of customer interfacing. I would say strong encouragement as a corporate policy. If an employee does not feel well on any level, they should be encouraged in today's world to stay home, and making sure that we understand quote unquote risk factors to the degree that we can without being invasive to older adults, underlying conditions such as heart disease, lung disease, liver, kidney disease, diabetes, and so on. Making sure that we're trying to manage the public perception of our company, the etiquette of our company, the safety of our company, our employees and customers. All these things I suspect will tie into customer retention and employee retention, both short and long term. Again, I know a lot of these things are certainly not new, but I think continued training certainly would not hurt any of us with these subjects. I wanted to tie in as well to this conversation, trying to tie in COVID, which is certainly, I think, a heavy subject for a lot of us, to the industry. Certainly, also into, am I a pest control owner who is holding on to my company, or am I a pest control owner who's contemplating selling my company? All of the speakers have done a great job today and talked about a lot of different subjects. I think all of us have touched on the economy. I would say none of us has a crystal ball, unfortunately, me included. Look, at the end of the day, we can all give you our thoughts and our opinions about where the market's headed. We can certainly give you our opinions on multiples. That's a question I'm sure we all get on a pretty regular basis. I think an interesting way to think about multiples is looking at economic influence over some of the driving factors behind the multiples. We all, sellers, representatives, buyers, whether we're looking at EBITDA, discounted cash flow, using cash, looking at internal rate of return, there's outside things that none of us can control, but certainly influence, believe it or not, acquisitions, even in the pest control industry. Some drivers that I think we're seeing right now, and I'll dive a little bit deeper into, is certainly what I'm going to call the Washington tax talk, including changes in capital gains, where the current administration and Congress are talking about significant changes. Again, please, politics aside. But there's also influences as well, such as interest rates, economic recovery post-COVID. We just talked about billions, hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars that have been spent by the federal government. The federal government has the same challenge that households have and businesses have. At some point, you got to pay the bill. And I think that could influence M&A in our space. One of the bigger challenges that I'll talk a little bit more about as well is getting more efficient in investing in IT. This is, I think, it is an investment, but as the world is evolving, IT, I like to say to my friends and family who know me, I'm probably like a lot of folks on the call today. I love it when it works, and when it doesn't, I don't like it so much. But we still need to invest in it, and we need to allow it to make our businesses more profitable and more efficient. Capital gains, look, I'm not a CPA, but at the end of the day, it's a tax on the growth and value of investments incurred when individuals and corporations sell the investments. A long-term gain is more than 1 year. A short-term gain is less than a year. The administration today is proposing to raise taxes on long-term capital gains for individuals earning more than $1 million to 39.6%. Added to the existing 3.8 investment surtax on high income investors, the taxes could go to 43.4. That does not include state taxes. At the end of the day, I think we all need to be aware of that. If you sell your business today, you probably keep more than if you are contemplating selling it down the road. The multiples may not change, but what you ultimately keep may change. Things for us to consider for sure. So we've all, I think, heard what goes up must come down. I suspect maybe the opposite of that is true. What goes down at some point is probably going to go back up as well. If we think about all of the money that has been spent in the COVID crisis, again, the government probably needs to figure out how to pay some of that down. This clearly shows income rates and capital gains rates at or near lows since 1954. At the end of the day, these numbers probably go up and influence, if you're going to sell your business, ultimately what you're going to keep when you do sell. CIT, corporate income tax, what is this? This is federal and state taxing business profits. Many companies, I suspect many companies on today's call and in our industry are not subject to corporate income tax because they're taxed as a quote unquote pass-through, which begs the question, what the heck's a pass-through? Pass-through is a sole proprietorship, partnership, S corp, that is not subject to the corporate income tax. Instead, the business reports its income on the individual income tax return of the owners, and it is taxed at individual income tax rates. This is a lucrative industry. That's why, outside investors, certainly PE firms, are so intrigued with this industry. We have recurring revenue. We're stable, we're forgiving, and we're profitable. What's not to like? But certainly, as you can see, going back pre-1998, corporate tax rates were very, very stable. The last administration certainly cut them, and the projection from the Internal Revenue Service is that they will go back up. They may not go back up to where they were, but there certainly appear to be on the increase. So interest rates, I think, play a part as well when we think about outside influences and acquisitions. What the heck's an interest rate? I suspect most of us know the simple definition is it's how much the lender is going to charge the borrower for the money. If the money gets more expensive, the buyers in our industry have to contemplate if that may or may not influence what they're willing to pay, because the money they're giving the seller is effectively getting more expensive. It certainly could be factored into valuations on the horizon. Again, none of us have a crystal ball, but I think this is, to a degree, common sense. So next, one of my favorite slides, we'll touch quickly on inflation. What the heck's inflation? Well, this kind of sums it up. Inflation is when you pay $15 for a $10 haircut that you used to get for $5 when you actually had hair. Things get more expensive, whether we like it or not. I think that this is a very, very critical thing for everybody on the call to think about. At the end of the day, if things that we purchase, fuel, chemical costs, I'm sure everybody on this call realizes that fleet availability and the cost of the fleets these days are getting more expensive. If you can get your hands on them, benefits are getting more expensive. So as things get more expensive, clearly that influences the P&L. So what is the solution if much of what we purchase for business becomes more expensive? Certainly one solution is cost control, but you can't cut all the meat off the bone. At some point, as an industry, if inflation hits and hits our P&Ls, then this actually influences value when you go to sell your business and influences net income when you hold your business. And I would advocate that it would certainly cause us all to consider price increases to keep net income level. This is really, I think, important. And at the end of the day, a lot of us, I don't think, necessarily tie in the price increases. I've always believed that pest control, and I'm speaking as an industry, I've always thought we could charge more. I've always thought that we're tied to healthcare, and we all know that healthcare is expensive. Look, at the end of the day, these are leadership decisions, leadership observations, whether it's at a corporate level or a branch level, but these things can also tie into holding and maintaining your business, as well as certainly influence what happens when you go to sell your business. So just thoughts on what I would say is economics. It's a wonderful thing at the end of the day that we are essential. I do think that, as we wrap up the inflation piece, and I'm actually going to go back to this slide real quick. The Fed chairman is Jerome Powell. He's recently certainly publicly stated that the Fed thinks that 2% inflation is healthy. You can see from this chart we're trending certainly north of that in the most recent few months. So it is something that I think we should all keep an eye on. Inflation at the end of the day influences the purchasing power of the cash that the companies have, existing PCOs and buyers. So I think, again, it's probably not something that we all watch, but we may feel in the business, we may feel it on our P&Ls. But at the end of the day, I think it is something, as I would tell any pest control owner, to watch this subject, and I think watch it pretty closely. At the end of the day, I believe clearly we are in the pest control industry. I think more so we're in the people. We're in the people business. We have people serving people serving people at the corporate level, at the branch level, and at the customer level. This is a pretty famous consultant, educator, and writer named Peter Drucker. He's deceased, but in his day advised some of the biggest companies in the world, General Motors, Sears, GE, Red Cross, Salvation Army. He actually wrote articles for the Wall Street Journal, Harvard Business Review, The Economist, and so on. One quote that he has that I absolutely love is that the ultimate resource in economic development is people. It is people, not capital or raw materials, that develop the economy. I wanted to share one of his thoughts, which is the need for quote unquote planned abandonment. Business and governments have a natural human tendency to cling to yesterday's success rather than seeing when they are no longer useful. When we think about the last year and a half that we've been through with COVID and PPP, PPE, certainly business changes. I think contemplating the human side of our industry, it should make us all as business leaders, whether we're owning a pest control company or we're selling a pest control company or we're acquiring a pest control company, look, how is the employee retention? What is the employee tenure? Customer retention? Do we have empty trucks? Do we have a bench? The bench question is a question I love. If you think about, I don't know, I assume most folks on this call watch football. You always have a backup quarterback, right? It's hard to run your offense without a quarterback. Well, it's hard to run your pest control company without people in the trucks, people on the phones, people interacting on the corporate side, certainly with our customers. And when you think about the planned abandonment, when you think about IT, when you think about social distancing and respirators and COVID and all those things, if we put one of the biggest challenges today in our industry is human resources and hiring and keeping people. Are we deploying the IT capabilities to our fullest potential? Do you still need a call center, or can you have the people that work in the call center work from home and put technology to work? Do you still need to go to the branch every day, or can we use the technology in the trucks, the handhelds, and the so forth, and maybe go to the branch once a week? These types of leadership decisions, the planned abandonment, and the ultimate resource of the people in our companies help drive employee retention, thus customer retention, and the value of the business, ultimately, whether you're holding it or selling it. So when you think about these sorts of heavy subjects, if you will, at the end of the day, I think we should all try really, really hard to stay focused on the human side of the business. From a what I'm going to call survive and thrive suggestions, I would say, based on what's happening with the Delta variant and others that appear to be on the horizon, one would be to keep PPE on hand and keep your safety, employee safety, and training on a very, very regular basis, making sure that the customers and employees understand what an essential business is and why we are an essential business. I would recommend, whether you're holding your company or contemplating selling it, investing in IT. Chances are you have IT in your business with unused capabilities today that could help you with safety and efficiency gains. Consistent daily, weekly, monthly safety training, financial review and focus. I covered price increases. I think this is a massive opportunity for most of the industry. I think a lot of times we make emotional decisions about price increases as opposed to quantitative decisions about price increases, ultimately staying incredibly focused on employee and customer retention. And at the end of the day, I would also suggest, I think we all get sort of stuck in a rut from time to time on whatever news source we like. Make sure whatever we're listening to or getting in terms of news, whether it's economic or otherwise, that it's from a sound source. At the end of the day, if you are considering selling your pest control company, this is a short view of what the process, I think, potentially looks like. At the end of the day, I would advocate preparing to sell, which is a pretty significant presentation all on its own. But if you want to increase the value or maximize the value of your enterprise, you need to be ready before you go to market. There's a lot of great M&A advisors out there. I strongly recommend using one. We certainly would hope you would use Kemp Anderson Consulting. Our approach and experience, we believe, to be unique and beneficial. I would say, and I heard one of the speakers earlier today talk about an experienced M&A attorney. Just because you know an attorney doesn't necessarily mean that attorney should be the one working on your acquisition when you sell it. They have different expertise, different experience. We recently worked on an acquisition. I suspect if he had hired an experienced M&A attorney, his fee would have been significantly less than using the attorney that he ultimately decided to use, which was a trusted friend. And his fees were significantly more than they needed to be because the attorney he ultimately chose did not have experience in acquisitions on any level. So there's risk in choosing attorneys that are not M&A attorneys. Once you have your team put together, which is typically, I think, an M&A advisor, an M&A attorney, your CPA, and wealth manager. At that point, you've got your team together. You prepare to sell. You prepare to go to market. Typically, I believe, because of experience and relationships, the M&A advisor should typically be the one leading the process. You go to market and you execute. You really need to be prepared, having been on the both sides of the table, buy side and sell side. Sellers that are prepared simply do better. It's not much more complicated than that. At the end of the day, as I started, we hope that you'll pick Kemp Anderson Consulting when you decide to exit. We feel like our experience makes us unique and gives us certainly strength in representing our clients, whether it's starting inside the industry, the relationships that we have, the fact that we've worked in private, public, and even PE firms, as well as owned and sold a pest control company, helps us wear the buy and the sell hat to get our clients the best results. At the end of the day, I do want to thank everybody, certainly again, PCT, GIE, all the sponsors and the listeners. Really grateful for everybody's time and energy on this subject. And we certainly hope that our presentation today was helpful.
Thanks, Kemp. Great presentation. We've got a few questions that came in here before we move on here, and we'll just roll right into those. A question came in was, how has COVID affected EV/EBITDA multiples in the pest control space? Are they higher than they were in 2019?
The short answer is I don't think we've seen an influence on those multiples as we sit here today. Certainly, as I pointed out in the presentation, PPE and the fact that we're essential and so many outside influences have helped our industry and an awful lot of industries stay stable. I don't think we've seen that as we sit here today, Brad. But the economic indicators that I tried to emphasize, I think, point to a potential for some change on the horizon. But I think a few of us today have said, who has a crystal ball? So
let's see, Kemp, this question came in earlier, and I think you sort of answered it with your slide about survive and thrive tips, but I'll go ahead and ask it again and see if there's anything else you wanted to add to it. The question was, having just gone through the COVID-19 pandemic, what are some lessons learned and how can PCOs prepare for future pandemics / periods of lockdown?
Man, that's a great question. I hope I did cover it at least at a high level on the survive and thrive piece of this. The biggest thing I think is staying focused on our people, right? Whether it's internal or external, whether it's the employer, the customer, whether it's PPE and safety and training and communication and IT. And I know I just rattled off, 6 or 7 bullet points that are all pretty heavy subjects, but I don't think there's a silver bullet, unfortunately, or a magic bullet to preparing or surviving and thriving if there are continued waves of the pandemic. I think you just have to be a very focused, deliberate business owner that is focused on those things, the safety, the people, the communication, the IT. At the end of the day, yes, we're in the pest control industry, but without our internal and external people, I think we're in trouble. So we have to really focus on the people and the technology and the safety and the communication. Those would be my big bullet points. And try your best to stay educated and informed and sort of in front of these subjects, whether you're going to hold your company or you're on a shorter horizon and you're contemplating selling it. I will certainly tell you, all buyers in today's world poke and probe the pandemic subject. They all address PPP. These subjects are heavy, they're real, they're potential liabilities in any transaction, and they're potential liabilities if you're going to hold your company. So I think that's a fantastic question. It's a heavy one. Hopefully I gave a little bit of guidance on that.
Kemp, that PPP question that came in during Greg's presentation came back again a little bit differently, with a little more color to it, if you will. So the question was, we had our first round of PPP forgiven, and it turned out that we did not need it. So how should we handle it on our books, and should we apply for another round if available, given all the future uncertainty of COVID and the economy?
Well, I'm going to deflect that a little bit because I am not a CPA and I am not an attorney. I would say get advice from 3 seats, get advice from your CPA, get advice from your attorney, and get advice from the lender. I would certainly make sure that if the PPP money was directed at the company, that it is properly recorded. I think Dan Gordon chimed in the last time that one was asked. And also make sure it's on the balance sheet. I would strongly advise pest control owners not to view that money as some sort of windfall and use it inappropriately, because I suspect that that could trigger an audit and all sorts of unpleasant things that go along with that. So I would just say get the advisor from the lender, if you used like a local bank, and certainly make sure that it's recorded properly with your CPA, and even get the proper legal guidance with your corporate attorney, so that you are properly recording it and covered.
Kemp, one more question that came in here was, can employers legally require employees to wear masks?
I'm not sure of that. That's a great question. That one may be for an attorney as well, or an HR consultant. I believe that as I had on one slide, the CDC is now requesting it even for vaccinated people. So I think you could certainly fall back on federal guidelines on that one. Again, the legal component of that question gives me a little bit of pause.
Understood. Okay, good deal. That's all the questions we had for you, Kemp. But thank you. Wonderful job on your presentation, and appreciate you being a part of our conference.
Brad, thank you. Thank you to your team. Always glad to be a part of it. I think you guys are awesome. So thanks for everything you guys do for the industry. We're very grateful.
Thanks, Kemp.